And the purpose of it is to rehabilitate them because they have become so degraded and so psychotic that they have to be separated and go through this particular physical work. They work for half the day and get audited on processes half the day until they come up to the next level. Another thing I've never felt good in Scientology about is the care of children. I have 3 children, and I've always given them my full attention. At the Fort Harrison, they had I never had my children at the Fort Harrison, but it happened to be right downstairs from the medical officer. So whenever I would go there, I would glance down and see the children. Once I heard a child screaming very loudly, I went down just from instinct, and I walked into where they keep the children. It was a toddler. He was all alone. His diaper was falling off, and he was screaming. There was no adult there. I just picked him up and, patted him a little bit. Several times there were other children wandering around, fighting with each other, the way children do. It was right next to the parking lot in the back, but they did have a gate there so the children wouldn't go out, but many times I saw them, they was kind of just left there. I can't say I know exactly how they were cared for, but what I saw, they were dirty. The room I went into was a mess. There were no sheets on the beds, and there were things thrown all around the room. As far as education goes, in Scientology, for all the years that I've been in, there has been a put-down of education by Ron Hubbard, by Scientologists. The school system is suppressive. Scientologists have said to me several times, "You're not sending your kids to college, are you?" And I said, "Of course I am." They said, "How?"
This is only a simulated regional hurricane evacuation exercise. I repeat, this is only a simulated hurricane evacuation exercise. If in fact this was a real hurricane evacuation order, you would have been instructed to tune your television sets to WEDU Channel 3 for your evacuation routes. This is only a simulated regional hurricane evacuation exercise of this station.
If there is, and you can get it in Scientology, you should be taking your courses and going clear. So education is discouraged very much in Scientology. It's a suppressive organization that doesn't really teach you anything, and as long as you have your Scientology training, you're going to make it in the world. My daughter was in the Sea Org, and she was in there for 7 months while I was training here in Clearwater. She had no schooling at all. She said she went to school, I think, 3 times. She had to work from 8 in the morning till 10:30 at night, 7 days a week. And they said there was no time for school. She was told that she would have weekends off in the Sea Org. This never happened. She got Saturday afternoon off for 3 hours if her stats were up. She soon realized that this is not what, she was in the wrong place, and I wasn't there, but she was living with my brother-in-law, so she never actually lived in the quarters with the other children. My daughter has gone to a Scientology school since she was born, literally. She went to a nursery, and then she had all her education up until she was 11 years old in a Scientology school. I discovered, well, I guess she was 10, up until 10. I discovered when she was 10 or 11 that she didn't know math. I felt very negligent. I assumed she's a brilliant girl. She was reading at 3 years old, very mature. Somehow it came out that she didn't know the 2 times table. Nothing. I got very, very upset. I went to the school, and they begged me not to take her out. They told me that the GO would pounce on them. That was the words that they used. The Ability School was run, I don't know the details, but the GO had some authority over the way the school was run. And the people who ran it said it's going to look very bad that a Scientologist took their child out. I said, I don't care what it looks like. My children, I want my children to have an education, and this is absurd. I took her out. I put her in public school, and she immediately went up to 5th grade math. She excelled, she's very bright. She was never taught anything in the school. The school was run like a Scientology organization. They had ethics conditions. The children were also taught about the enemy, the outside world. Scientology children have an attitude that it's the suppressives out there and Scientologists. They've often said to my daughter about going in the WOG world. A WOG is someone not in Scientology. And when they heard she was going to public school, they frightened her that my daughter cried for 3 days. She thought they were going to kill her in public school. And since then, she's out of Scientology. She knows everything that I do now. But basically, the education is totally put down in Scientology. When I was in Los Angeles recently, visiting my sister, I helped out in a Scientology private school. It was called Renaissance School. I'm not an official teacher, but I was helping because they didn't have anyone. There was a boy there who was 9 years old. He had been brought up in the Sea Org. His parents both were in, and he was born in. And I understand from the owners of the school that he spent most of his 9 years in the children's RPF. I don't know what that is, but I assume it's the same thing as the adult RPF. This boy couldn't read one word at 9 years old, and I taught him how to read his first word, and I taught him his first sentence. And he was crying that he could read one sentence. He was 9 years old, and he was born in Scientology, in his Scientology schools. I also know that the children have a lot of illnesses. I don't know if I didn't see it, but my sister was there, and the children in the child care org at Los Angeles, a friend called my sister and said, I need help. My son is very ill, and I don't know what to do. My sister went there, and her friend's son had a fever and was crying. His job was to be the nanny. He was to watch the younger children, and he had a high fever. She went to the medical officer and she said, this boy is sick, he needs a doctor. He said, he's not sick. I examined him, and he's supposed to be on post. He said, there's nothing wrong with him. He said, I already know what it is. The children have herpes. And my sister walked in, and she saw infants, she saw babies on the floor. They had sores all over their face and mouth. And my sister went into a rage. She went in and she said, I want these children taken care of. And the medical officer said, well, who are you? What are you doing here? He said, as a matter of fact, I don't want to talk to you anymore. He said, we don't have any money for a doctor. So she said, well, you get the money. And then finally my sister got so mad, she said, well, if you don't do something about these children right now, I'm calling the Board of Health. When she said that, she got a lot of attention. GO, people, do you realize what you just said? She was declared PTS, of threatening to embarrass or sue Scientology, one of those categories. The medical officer called her, he said, you just committed a suppressive act. She said, no, you committed a suppressive act. She says, I want these children cared for. So I know this goes on. I've seen it. I've seen many sick children in Scientology, and it's looked at that you should be on post. They don't need a doctor. The medical officer sometimes acts as a doctor. I've never seen... I believe totally and over and over again. I felt very sorry for people that I felt that I was trying for like 17 years to go to organization training. I said, if I did it, so what would be going to do? I felt that those people started with helping to engage something that was more like even after doing it, I felt Particular thing was.
A WOG was an outsider again?
A WOG is a person who is not in Scientology, so that's how they refer to someone like that. No, I don't know firsthand. I just know from my sister. I think I covered most of my notes here.
We don't even know where to start. It says so many startling things. One thing that struck me as herpes. Is that a venereal disease?
There are two types. That's what, because my sister took the child and paid for it herself. She took the child to the doctor. He was given antibiotic, and she said it was a virus type of herpes rather than the venereal type. There are two different things.
Yeah, we used to get it on.
It was an infection.
It was diagnosed, though?
Yes, it was diagnosed by the doctor.
All right. While you were deeply involved in all these things, did you still believe in the incredible background of L. Ron Hubbard?
I believed totally in L. Ron Hubbard up until recently. I felt very sorry for him. I felt a deep compassion. I felt that I had tried for 17 years to make the organization sane, and I said, if I feel this way, what must Ron Hubbard be going through? And I felt a devotion to him to try to make it sane. I felt he was one of the greatest people that have ever lived, and I wanted to help him. Up until recently, even after Clearwater, I said, if Ron Hubbard only knew, as I said, up until recently.
Mr. Flynn, I don't know if I can ask this, but what is the ultimate that you expected with the new breakthrough? Would that be considered a faith you're looking for in this new breakthrough, and which kept you going, apparently, in this organization?
It was probably...
It's one of my first few visits to cramming. There was a woman who was probably about 65 years old. She was a Knots auditor. She was there for training, which is admirable because people who become auditors want to help people. She apparently made some kind of mistake. She was sitting there. She was trembling. She had tears in her eyes. The cramming officer, his name was Spike Bush, who in my opinion is, never mind. Well, his name was Spike Bush. He was standing there. He was sitting down. She was in front of him. He was pounding the table. She said, she was stuttering. He said, but I thought. He said, don't think. He said, that's your problem. You think. He pounded the table at least 6 times while he was screaming at the top of his lungs, don't think. And yeah.
Well, if you want to continue, did you ever, after 15 years, didn't you ever feel like a slave or an indentured servant there? And you're working for $10 a week, and how did you exist, and who took care of your children?
No, for all the years I was in, I never felt like a slave or that I was working for nothing. When I was on staff, I was married at the time. This is before my divorce, so my husband was taking care of the bills. My children came with me when they were young. I always brought them with me, and I had them in a nursery. And I always went home by 3 o'clock at the beginning when my children were little. And I had a home, and I had a normal life, not like many Scientologists who have no other income. And in later years, I worked at a mission, which paid $125 a week, and I only worked till 6 o'clock. So I had other businesses on the nights or on the weekends where I would do sales or something like that. The only time that I have ever felt I was treated not as a human being. Was at Clearwater in '79. Before that, I felt that it didn't matter if I got $3 or $10. It had nothing to do with money at the time. It had to do with just helping to make a better world. It didn't matter.
Okay. You said this in Clearwater, when you were here, they're collecting about $1 million a week. And I think you may have mentioned that one week there was $2.3 million.
No, I don't know of that. I think someone else said that.
All right. Well,
yeah.
$1 million is a lot of money in a week. Who collected it? And was it in cash? And where do you put it? And did it leave the area?
I don't know anything about the finances at Clearwater. I know that I know where the money goes. You bring it to the cashier. There's a cashier window. First you go to a registrar. You sign up for what service you want. It costs a specific amount of money. You have to pay in advance. Then you go to the cashier. You pay the money there, however you want to pay it, and they give you a receipt for your service. And then you go and start your course.
With so much money coming and such a cash flow, why was you fed beans and rice?
I have asked people that question, and they said it's very expensive to run the Fort Harrison, and maybe there's not enough money. I felt it was absolutely absurd, and I had many questions on where the money was going.
How do you feel about being denied medical treatment, you and other people that you came in contact with?
Well,
widespread?
Not getting medical treatment?
Yes.
Well, you can see a doctor in Scientology. You could go to a doctor, but you go through the medical officer. In other words, he makes recommendations.
All right. We had a medical officer. What was his or her qualifications? Were they a nurse or?
No, the fellow who was...
Sir, I'm sorry, go ahead.
The fellow who was the medical officer when I was there, I can't remember his name. He wasn't a doctor, but he had some training of some sort. I don't know what you call it, like an aide, an assistant. He had some type of medical knowledge, definitely not a doctor. I never met a medical officer who was a doctor in Scientology. It's usually just a regular staff member. It could be anyone. You don't even have to have any knowledge of medicine. Basically, you use L. Ron Hubbard's policies on, well, actually, he doesn't deal in that part. He'll just determine if it needs medical attention or something like that. But you're not actually denied. If you insist and say, I want to see a doctor, you probably have to go through a little convincing. But you can go. I've never been denied medical treatment.
Is any labor performed at the Fort Harrison by townspeople that get paid the minimum wage or more, or for what they're worth?
You mean people not at COV?
Like painters, plumbers, carpenters?
I never saw anyone in the Fort Harrison doing anything other than Scientologists, so I don't know. In other words, they hire people who have certain skills, like if someone's a plumber, they'll try to recruit them. Whatever other things, they have all Scientologists running the Fort Harrison, as far as I've ever known.
Talking about business courses, what business courses were offered for either for students or for someone of your age?
A business course? Well,
you said that the founder knows more about business than anybody else. I was wondering what he taught.
I'm trying to think of the names of the courses. Well, they have the Flag Executive Briefing Course, FEBC, and they have the OEC, the Organizational Executive Course, I guess it's called. And in there are all policies on managing a business, on administrative policies that tell you exactly how to run an organization, how to set it up, how to make an organization board, and so forth, flow lines within an organization.
Were you given any contact with the outside world while you were in Clearwater? Did you make outside friends, like go to the beach or...
No, I never spoke to anyone in Clearwater. It was kind of, you just don't do that. No one told me I couldn't speak to anyone. It's just something you don't do. I don't know why.
Where is the RPF?
Yeah.
Where are those people? Where are they kept? I mean, do they have a separate office, or and how do you become an RPF person?
Well, you are placed in the RPF for breaking the rules, for sort of like you would say, in other words, committing a crime. If you, I can just give you examples of crimes that someone might do. If your stats were very down, I can't say, I don't have knowledge. I've seen things where it said that so-and-so is assigned to the RPF. You'll get something, some kind of ethics hearing, like a committee of evidence, where people will listen, see what your crime was, and decide if you should go in the RPF or not. Certain things are just instant RPF, I think, like having sex with someone who you're not married to. I think that, I'm not positive, I think that would be RPF.
That would be considered a crime, then?
That's definitely a crime, I know that.
Some of these children that have to go to school, didn't you find it curious that your child couldn't, although she could read well, couldn't do her 2 times 2 tables or mathematic tables?
It was one of the biggest shocks of my life. I felt bad for my own neglect that I should assume. I just assumed that she was in school. I was working very hard in my own business, and she was just so bright. And the teacher always said she was doing fine, and she was doing wonderful. And you just don't go around, asking the kid, what's 5 times this? I just assumed it's such a natural part of learning until something, she told me that she didn't want to play a game. And I said, well, why? She said, because I'm stupid. Because there was a child much younger than her who was, they were figuring out math in this game. And she has cried hundreds of hours since then because I immediately tried to put her into a private school that my sons went to. My sons went to one of the best schools in the city, a private school. And I wanted her to go there, and they wouldn't accept her. I didn't tell her why. I said they were too crowded. She had special scores, and she was in the 1 percentile in math. And I'm still trying to repair her right now. I'm getting her a special tutor, and then try to re-enter her into private school. And I work with her every day now on my own.
Do you think there's young people there that are being raised without a minimal education that we have grown to expect in Pinellas County for our own children?
I'm sorry, could you give me that again?
Do you think that there are people within Clearwater, within the Scientologist organization, that are still not getting a proper education, as was illustrated in the case of your own child?
I positively think so, but I don't know. The reason I think so is because when I was at Clearwater, I saw children very often during the day. There were people, little children who were folder pages, and they would be in uniform with their shorts and lanyards, and they were my daughter's friends from New York who had joined the Sea organization and come here, and they would be working during school hours, folder pages. I don't know if they didn't have school. If they did, I don't know where it was, but I did see children many times during the day working.
These young people were folding pages, you say?
Folder pages. They carried the page. In other words, if you're going to audit someone, you would call for a certain folder where the records are kept, and these folder pages would bring it to the auditor.
They're like a page, then?
A page, a messenger. That's what they call a little messenger.
They weren't folding pages like pages in a book?
No, I'm sorry, yeah. A messenger to bring folders to different locations.
You were here since I have been mayor, and we've had sometimes a stormy time here. Didn't any of these other outside activities that the city or other private individuals may have done, didn't it ever affect you, or didn't it ever question what you're doing there, or that maybe or question the credibility or the background of L. Ron Hubbard?
I definitely wondered what I was doing here when I was in Clearwater. I didn't question the credibility of Ron Hubbard. It was so embedded in me that through all the suffering that I went through, I never once considered that L. Ron Hubbard had anything to do with it. I considered him a victim of a lot of stupid people who wouldn't listen to this good man, and I never once questioned him. I felt terrible about the people in Clearwater. I said, they probably had a peaceful town here. I said, these people come up and start changing things, and I actually would snuck out, and I would read the paper, and I would see about infiltration into the Clearwater Sun, and I would think, I said, why don't they leave people alone? And I was very upset about it, but it was like a separate thing. That was the GO. That was not my field. My field was counseling people, and I said, if only the GO would be decent. And I said, how could Clearwater be friendly towards Scientology? I mean, if someone came into my town and started infiltrating and staging these things and dressing up as clowns, I wouldn't like them either. I was embarrassed to be a Scientologist when I was here. I felt embarrassed for Ron Hubbard. I thought that these people were destroying Scientology by making it a mockery. And I wouldn't talk to a resident, I guess, because I would never say I was a Scientologist. I was embarrassed. Sometimes people would go by and yell out things or throw stones, and I said, boy, I'm embarrassed.
Were you here when the Scientologists protested or picketed the Clearwater Sun and dressed up as Nazis?
I remember them dressed up as Nazis. I didn't know what they were picketing, but I saw Nazi uniforms, and I was very embarrassed, and I thought it was an insane act. And I think people did then think that Scientologists were Nazis. They didn't understand what they were doing. I saw the uniforms, and I was very embarrassed by it.
I think many other people were embarrassed for it. One more question, and I'll turn it over. But what do you think your typical day was like here in Clearwater? And just give me a routine of a typical day that's not particularly difficult and not particularly easy, but just a normal day of Clearwater when you were here at the height of your...
A student.
A student.
A student would have to, let me see, my memory is a little foggy. Most of it was horror, so I don't remember a normal day.
Well,
you wake up, every day is the same as every other day, which I have now found is a very destructive thing. In other words, you wake up and you have to be at muster at, this is not accurate, maybe 8:15, 8:30, something like this. You must be there, and they say, that's it. They call your name. It's very regimented, very official. Your muster is called, and then you'll be given your schedule of the day, who you're auditing, what time. It'll be posted on a board. You'll audit these people one after another. They come in and out. You might have 6 pre-clears. It's sort of like an assembly line. You finish with one, the next one's waiting. You take them in. Then you get your half-hour lunch to run back and forth. You'll again audit people till 10 o'clock at night. You go to sleep, wake up. It's exactly the same every day. It's just, I lost touch with reality when I was there. I really didn't know what day it was, what month it was. It didn't matter. And most of it was through severe physical pain. It was a big blur.
you said physical pain, but you were not, earlier you said you were allowed to go to a doctor, but and also another time you said you couldn't, or you implied that. Am I to conclude that you could go if you could convince the medical officer that you were serious enough?
I didn't even think of going to a doctor. I didn't care. I didn't ask to go. I just wanted to get out of there. I knew that once I got away, I didn't need a doctor. I had to go home. And when I did go home, I was in perfect health after about 2 weeks. I haven't had any problem with it. I wasn't chronically ill with arthritis. I mean, it hadn't bothered me in maybe 8 years. It's not that I was suffering with this or I came into Scientology to handle it. I didn't even care about it. It was just from this undue stress that something happened to my system. So I really never had any thoughts about the doctor. I just wanted to leave.
Did you ever see any skimming with $1 million a week coming in? Did anybody try and skim or within the organization or take a little bit off the top?
I have no information on the money or where it went.
Okay. Mr. Culverback.
Yeah. Lori, let's talk about education. You said your daughter went to a Scientology school how long? While in Pinellas County?
Oh, no, she didn't go to school here.
She didn't?
No. She went to school in New York, and then she went to school in Los Angeles while I was training here.
Okay, as a Scientology school, did they have specific hours at all for education? Certain number of hours? Yes,
well, when she went to it was a private Scientology school, which I paid $225 a month for. That's what she went to in New York for most of her life. When she joined the Sea organization, she was in Los Angeles. She only went to school 3 times in 7 months, so there was no hours for school. My nephews were in school at the time, in the Sea Org, and their senior told them, they were, I think, 12 and 10. He said, we're going to give you the minimum education required by law, which happens to be 2 hours a day, I think. And he said, in 7 months, I said, what did you learn in school? He said he had algebra. That was the only thing he had in 7 months, and he only had that a few times. And his senior told him that after a couple of weeks, we're going to use these 2 hours for your Scientology training, so you won't have to go to school at all.
Okay, do you have any knowledge of the education here in Clearwater for children?
No, I don't.
Okay. On the medical officer, you said that you made it to a doctor here in town that prescribed you certain medication and certain routines for you to get better. Is that correct?
Yes.
Once you got back to the Scientology headquarters, were you allowed to complete that treatment?
I wasn't prescribed any medication. It was basically bed rest, and I was to walk an hour a day and hot baths 3 times a day.
Did you do that?
No, I didn't. I did it for maybe 2 days, and I don't know why, but I never did it. I can't remember. That period is very foggy because it's all blurred together. I know I didn't take walks.
Okay.
I took a walk once, and the ethics officer came with me.
Do you remember who gave you the shot, what the name of the medical officer was when you came to Clearwater?
I've been trying to remember his name, and I just can't. I never really... I guess I did know his name at the time, but it would be on record, I guess, who was the medical officer in 1979 of July or August.
Did you see any certificates on the wall from the state or the county, either for nursing or as an education for a doctor when this person gave you the shot?
No.
Did he?
I asked him if he was a doctor. He said no.
And he gave you the shot?
Yes.
Is this common practice that the medical officer would do?
I never heard of it before, but every person who came to Clearwater got the shot as the first stop on their routing form, but I had never heard of it before Clearwater.
Okay, while you're at Fort Harrison, there are exits to and from the hotel. Were they clearly marked? Do you remember markings, exit for fire?
I think so. Well, yeah, I remember one door that said that there was an alarm on it. We were never to use that door. It said exit. I think it was for if you opened it up, some alarm went off.
Were there any obstructions in front of the door?
I don't clearly remember.
Do you remember any trash or rubbish laying around or tight quarters that would obstruct either fire personnel or block exits to and from a building?
Well, I would say tight quarters that I would think, this is my opinion, if there was a fire, with how many people were in each room, it would be very, very hectic trying to get out of the building because each room had 10 people. It was a very small room. The hallways were very, very narrow. I hadn't thought about it when I was there, but looking at it now, it would probably be chaos.
How would you characterize the living conditions there? Would you characterize them as safe and clean, sanitary, or unsanitary and unhealthy?
I would classify it as unsanitary and very, very uncomfortable, with 10 people in a room in the middle of the summer with no air conditioners and a lot of bugs crawling around. It was very, very uncomfortable and unsanitary also.
One bathroom.
One bathroom in the room, and it had to be on post at 8 o'clock. You know, very difficult to take a shower and find the right time to do whatever you had to do in the bathroom.
Now, was this herpes outbreak here in Clearwater?
No, this was in Los Angeles.
Do you have any knowledge of the hepatitis? Was there any hepatitis outbreak at Fort Harrison while you were there?
I don't know. I didn't hear about it.
Okay. On the, you were talking about the policy of bringing people back, or the RPF, etc. Did you ever see anybody restrained or held against their will? Did you ever hear of anybody held or brought back?
I'm trying to think. I know I positively heard of people being gotten and brought back positively.
Was this common knowledge?
Yes.
That if you left, you would be
This is
brought
accepted.
back?
This is in a bulletin or a policy. I think it's called blown students. It's in one of the training, one of the policies concerning students. This is not secret. This is out in the open. And I'm a trained supervisor. And I've studied this and checked out on this material where it says if a student blows, you're to do such and such, call them. If they don't come in, you're to go to their home physically and bring them back. So this is common knowledge to Scientologists.
How much money did you pay while you were a Scientologist to the organization, approximately?
Well, in all these years, it wasn't as expensive when I came in 1965. I would have to just guess, in services, I probably paid $10,000 or $15,000 in traveling expenses and living expenses for myself and my 3 children, in England for 6 months, in California for many months. I would say maybe $30,000 I've spent. And in loss of business, times when I left to go to this OPSI and knots and everything else, maybe $50,000 I would say of money lost.
out of the services you paid for, did you ever think of it as a donation, or did you pay specifically for a service?
No, there's no such thing as a donation in Scientology for a service. The only donation would be something to the, I don't know what they call it, but I've donated to it many times, the legal fund. When I thought I was helping people who were being victimized by the government, they would always call me up because I would always give them $50, you know, because they knew I worked and had some money. But that's the only donation I know of in Scientology. It is, no one has ever mentioned the word to me, or I've never heard it mentioned to any person who came in for a service. It's what course do you want? I want this course. It costs this much money. You must pay for your course in full, specifically the amount that it lists on the card, and then you can start your service.
What made you take this service? Why would you spend $15,000 for this service?
Well, it isn't... see, when I came in, I didn't come in and spend $15,000. The most I ever paid at one time, I paid for every level they had. In those days, for all the OT levels, cost a little over $2,000, which now would cost a few $100,000 maybe. So that's the largest amount of money I ever paid, which I figured at that time, the thing they used for promotion was that for the price of a car, like at that time, 20-something $100, you can have eternal freedom, spiritual freedom. It seemed so ridiculous that someone would buy a car when you can gain all this, what was promised. It didn't seem like a large amount of money. So I never paid these large sums. I took a course for $500. I mainly audited and was a staff member. I think I was mainly interested in helping other people. I didn't receive much auditing. I've had very little auditing in Scientology. I didn't feel the need for it. I've been in relatively good shape, and I really didn't require much auditing.
Did you ever tell people while you were auditing them that it would not cure specific sicknesses and that it had no medical basis?
I didn't as an auditor, but it states on the e-meter that this does not cure illness, and I think when people sign up, they have to sign something that I'm not here to cure a specific illness.
That's all.
Okay.
Mr. Burfield.
I have just a couple of questions here. You spoke very highly of Mr. Hubbard. I take it that you do not believe in him any longer, is that correct?
No, I don't.
What about his doctrines and philosophies? Do you still have confidence in him?
No, I don't.
If you were to take some of these books and read them now, how would you look upon them?
I have done that. I've read over some of the material, which was, I suppose, like a Bible to me, and I found out some very fascinating things that I've gone through a tremendous emotional upset the last few months trying to get my mind straight from thinking for 17 years. It was very difficult, and I wanted to. I picked up some of the books and I looked at some of the policies, and it's like reading something that I've never read before. The interpretation that I put on it was my own ideas. I thought it meant what I wanted it to mean. Looking at things now where it says that if a person disagrees, they must have a misunderstood word or something to that effect, I see the technology as totally, totally different now.
Would you envision it as being misleading to the public?
Definitely misleading.
To the point that one could call it fraud or not?
In my opinion, it is totally fraud.
Just a couple other questions here. One of our purposes in this hearing is, needless to say, our concern is the health, safety, and welfare of the people in Clearwater. You mentioned these children. As a mother, the safety or the health of those children, how would you look upon that? Do you think that the city of Clearwater is running a service there?
I don't think I understand the question.
Well, are we performing our duties if these children at the Fort Harrison are going unattended?
No, I feel that attention should be put on the children in Scientology. I feel that they have no say in this. Their parents are Scientologists and the children are neglected, and I think someone should do something about it.
Mr. Caldbank also asked you a question about the number of people in a room, 10 to a room. You did mention, I believe, that you had some inspections. Did you ever have any inspections from the fire marshal?
Yes, regularly.
What did they say when they'd come to a room that had 10 beds?
Oh, I never saw them come into the room, ever. We just were informed that they were going to be on the premises tomorrow. I don't know what they looked at. I was doing my course or my auditing. I was never in a room where they walked in.
Do you know for a fact whether or not they were given advance notice of these visitations by the various governmental agencies?
I don't know how they found out, but they knew the day before. They knew, I don't know how much before, but they always told us when it was going to happen.
You had also mentioned earlier that a woman had spent somewhere in the neighborhood of $200,000 to $300,000 on these programs.
Mm-hmm.
Do you know that for a fact?
Well, the person told me they did. I mean, I didn't see the money.
One, I guess, last question, and I don't really know how to word this. Well, let me go out on 2 points. Do you have any fear of retaliation when you leave here today?
I could say I don't know what to expect. In the beginning, when I first started this, which I haven't really explained why I'm doing this, I mean, what brought this about, which I think is significant, I was in terror. I was in absolute fear when I made my first moves to find out some more information. I would be cautious, I would say.
I guess the last part of this, and the one that bothers me the most, when you were having your problems, do I interpret, and I'm not trying to put words in your mouth, that you felt that in the city of Clearwater there was no safe haven or no one that you could turn to for help?
It never even entered my mind. Through all the years of Scientology, it is embedded in you that you never speak to an outsider about an internal problem. In other words, if the technology is out, it's like just a code of ethics. Like, in other words, if we have a problem in Scientology and something is wrong, you don't go to an official because then they would think Scientology is bad, Ron Hubbard is bad. So you just don't consider things like that. It never entered my mind. I thought I had to get out through Scientology. I had a route out.
So you had to go out through the system then?
Yes, I never considered telling an outsider because they would then not understand that Ron Hubbard was good and it's only these few people. You have to keep it secret and handle it internally and try to write up reports and try to protect Ron Hubbard and the organization.
Just one last one, not to bear on your personal problems here. Your divorce was caused by Scientology?
I wouldn't say it was caused by Scientology. I believe it was a contributing factor because most Scientologists don't associate with WOGs. I was one of the few exceptions that I had achieved these high states, and my husband was still a WOG. I was the only one in Scientology at the time, and I was known for it, and people would constantly say to me, how could you stand it? How could you stand it? And I couldn't communicate the things in Scientology terms to my husband, and I would always be with Scientologists. And I didn't create my marriage properly because I did start to consider him an outsider. So it didn't cause it. Scientology didn't do anything to my marriage. It was my own distance that was created with him.
No further questions.
You started volunteering your own, so I'll ask you the question. What brought you here today?
After I left Clearwater, I felt that I had just escaped with my life. I literally felt that I had been to a hell and that I was alive again, and I just didn't want, I knew I would never, ever be on staff or have anything to do with Scientology again. I didn't care if I wasn't contributing anymore. I said, if it's that bad, let them fix it up. I had no intentions of doing anything against Scientology. I just wanted to stay away. And then I went recently, in November of this year, this past November, I went to California to live with my sister.
And Scientologists constantly visit, because that's basically the only friends that we've had, as Scientologists. And I was still in good standing, very well thought of, and they keep telling me stories. And finally, I couldn't stand it anymore. Well, a particular friend came over to the house. She had just received
her not auditing, and she came in and she said how wonderful she was doing, that she went to a restaurant, she was eating a hamburger, and all of a sudden the hamburger started screaming at her. And then the wall started screaming. And then she said, tears came out of her eyes because she felt so sorry for the other people in the restaurant because they didn't know what she knew. And I got tears in my eyes and I said, they can't do this anymore. I want answers. And then I looked at the grade chart and I noticed that a lot of the OT levels were taken off and they were replaced with knots. Every OT level was knots, and it became horrifying to me. I said, I can't sit back anymore. I want answers. So I I looked for Paulette Cooper's book, Scandal. I said maybe she'll give me a clue, because up until then, a Scientologist never reads anything bad about Scientology. You assume it's a lie immediately. So I was too ignorant to read it at the time. We couldn't get that book. I called Reader's Digest. I looked, and finally I got in touch with a man called Brown McKay. And I spoke with him. He was a declared suppressive, I had heard, who was trying to save Scientology, quote, suppressive person. So I said, I have never talked to a suppressive person in 17 years. It's a high crime. It is a terrifying experience. It took me 2 days to get up the courage to call Brown McKay. I called him. He was one of the nicest people. He was in Scientology 25 years. As a matter of fact, he was on one of the courses I was. He's a Class 8 auditor, so forth. And he had the same feelings I had for all these years, that something's wrong. And all of a sudden I started finding another person. I met Eddie Walters, and we all felt, and I saw more and more of my friends being damaged. And I said, I want answers now. I want to know where Ron Hubbard is. I want to know who is running Scientology. I asked them at the Advanced Organization in Los Angeles. I said, who are the board of directors? Who is the watchdog committee? This is a committee which no one knows who it is. And I couldn't get any answers. And finally, I started to have thoughts about L. Ron Hubbard. I said, wait, I started waking up. I think it took this time from Clearwater to be away from Scientology. I started thinking straight, and I said, we are being audited towards more ability, more freedom, more capabilities, towards OT, which is an operating being or Satan. How could Ron Hubbard, who was more capable than any of us, be more and more capable, and he's hiding for 15 years? Where is he? Why isn't he helping? Why isn't he coming forward? Why? So I asked some people in Scientology, in the Sea Org, security. I said, I've been hearing security for 10 years. I don't understand it anymore. I said, if it's security, why doesn't he go on a film and give a briefing to Scientologists in the world? I was getting more and more upset. I said, I want answers now. Who is running this? What kind of organization is it? I saw the crimes happening, and I started to, and I also questioned, well, how capable is this man? I said, his son is not talking to him, which is L. Ron Hubbard Jr. I never met him, but I knew. I said, how could he not be talking to his own father? We have technology to handle anyone, supposedly. His other son committed suicide. His wife is in jail. He's hiding. What kind of man am I following? What am I dedicating my life to? I couldn't find the answers. And then, little by little, things fell in place. And I did see documents of Ron Hubbard's past, and I had tremendous anger. My mind was boggled. I couldn't adjust my thinking of what had happened for the past 17 years. That while I was at Clearwater, Ron was who he didn't care at all. And that hatred has left, and the anger has left. I have no, I'm not on a crusade against Scientology. I have no vengeance whatsoever. I feel a responsibility to the people that I've talked to. I've trained hundreds, maybe thousands of students. They've trusted in me, and they've told me, even after I told them what I felt about Scientology, they said, how? But I always felt that I wanted to be like you, and they felt that I was the OT levels. I said, no, that was me. And I want any Scientologist listening to know that I feel a responsibility to help any Scientologist that I could. I don't plan to attack Scientology at all. I just want to finish it right here and now and say that I'm not a Scientologist, and maybe help someone to at least leave room to have some free thought, to consider what I'm saying, and just look and say, am I happy? Do I see any of Scientology being applied in life? And then I want to go on with my own life. And also I want to say that I consider almost most Scientologists that I know are some of the best people in the world. They're dedicated. They truly believe, as I did, that they're helping mankind. And they're my best friends, many of them, and they probably won't talk to me now, but they're still my best friends. So that's why I'm here. I'm here just to rid Scientology of all the lies and end it right here.
Thank you. Do you have any questions, Mrs. Garvey? Okay.
Back in 1965, what was it that turned you on to this organization? Was it the background of Hubbard? Was it the grandiose things they promised? What was it that got you?
It was 1965, and the thing that got me was I was very, very impressed with Ron Hubbard. I thought that it was miraculous that one man developed something that could free mankind of all these ridiculous, irrational things and psychosomatic illness. I loved him right away. I loved him for being so courageous and going through the war and healing himself and studying in Asia for all these years just to devote his life to mankind. And I was so impressed that I loved him from the first moment. And it was a very traumatic thing for me when I found out.
What were you promised? When you started taking some of these courses, did they promise any results for you? Do you remember?
I was actually never sold auditing. In the old days, it wasn't as bad in the earlier days. I mean, I just wanted it and came in, and I think part of my purpose was more to counsel people. I didn't have many problems. The thing that it promised was, I guess I was more interested in the aims of Scientology. I thought it was beautiful to be part of a group that was going to handle drugs, crime, war. I mean, it was like, gee, I found such a good purpose in life, and my children now will have a saner world to grow up in. That's why I joined. I joined just to make a better world. You know, I wasn't promised anything specific. It did say on the grade chart what you would attain, and I was very interested in more spiritual awareness. My main reason for coming in was that, for spiritual awareness and to understand death and what happens when you die and things like that.
You said you didn't take much auditing, but you did work as an auditor. Did you ever tell anyone that your auditing was confidential?
That their auditing is confidential?
Were you ever told that your auditing is confidential, the information that you received?
Oh, positively. It's printed. You read it. You know, when you, I don't even know where specifically, but that's very common knowledge. It's printed in a lot of places. Anything you say is kept in confidence. It's assumed, and it's also printed.
Would you have continued as an auditor if you, in fact, knew that this was not going to be kept confidential?
Never. One of the things that upset me and absolutely brought me to tears, that I did see some information from a pre-clear folder that was used by the Guardian's office. I saw the person's name, and I saw all their sexual withholds, and I cried because that was something sacred to me as an auditor, that a person can tell me anything. And to me, it was the same as a priest, and I feel that all the people that I have audited, I've subjected them to harassment, and it was a shock to me that disturbed me very much.
You actually did see, then, an audit that had been used?
Yes.
When you were told about the official visit, what are some of the things that you needed to do?
We had to dress a certain way. On certain days, it said no jeans. You were to be polite to any wog.
What about anything physically in the building?
That's what I'm trying to think
Anything moved? Anything had to be put away?
I saw things being moved. I didn't do it because I wasn't a staff. I was training or being an auditor. But I saw things being moved and shuffled, and I don't know the details on it, though.
Okay. But you do know that, in fact, can say that when there was going to be a fire inspection, they knew ahead of time that there was going to be a fire code inspection?
Yes, there's no question about that.
Okay, even though our inspections are supposed to be spur of the moment and spontaneous?
Oh, I didn't know that. I thought that they announced it.
No, it's not standard practice.
Oh, well, then they found out some way.
Okay. That's what I wanted to find out.
Clarification,
No.
Commissioner. We frequently, in fact, most of the times announce that we're going to be in the check area before we go in.
But not all the time.
Generally, we do. We have, but
We would work our way down the street, though, wouldn't we, Mr. Shoemaker? And then by the time, if you start 3 doors away, then they know you're coming.
that's very true. Yeah.
Okay.
So they're warned that way by just looking at the neighbor.
Mm-hmm.
What were you told, or what did you know about the GO office?
What I knew of the GO office was they were kind of the elite of Scientology. They were the heroes. They were admired very much. I had considered going into the GO. They had tried to recruit me several times. They felt that I had a good image and I could be very valuable to them. And I said possibly sometime I might join. And the GO, the purpose was to protect Scientology and make it safe, protect it from any enemy so that myself as an auditor can go and counsel people without being harassed by our so-called enemies, which were numerous, mentioned all the time. I believed it totally up until recently that all these agencies have been attacking us, and if it wasn't for the Guardian's office, I wouldn't be able to be here and help people. So they were very well respected and admired. It was very secret. You never knew what they were doing, and sometimes people were picked for a specific project, and it was like an honor, and they kind of felt like a Secret Service guy, and they would go around feeling very, very important. It was an honor to work for the GO.
You were never picked for any specific project that you were supposed to do?
I don't think I've ever done anything for the GO other than I mentioned I was approached to be that agent. I never actually did a GO project.
Okay. One of the things we often wonder about is, does anyone ever hear the news? You mentioned
no.
going out and trying to read a newspaper. There's no TV, no radio, no newspapers available?
You're not...
Would you believe them if you had them?
Well, I guess I wasn't as brainwashed as most because I believed what I read in the paper. But it's, I don't know the word, it's suggested that you don't read newspapers and you don't listen to the news. It is suggested that the news will always lie. It's predetermined. Don't ever, ever talk to a reporter. I was in fear of reporters. I thought they were all out to get us. You're not allowed to ever discuss anything.
How you
so
feel?
It's, no, reporters have always been in Scientology. This is from the day I came in. We have policy that news reporters are not allowed to take a Scientology course. As a director of training, I used to interview people and give them a check on the e-meter. Are you here for any other purpose than you state? And I used to give people clearance. I was petrified that these reporters would come in and destroy it. And then recently I said, why in the world can't, I used to say it a few times, why can't a reporter come in? What are we doing here that's illegal? I'm teaching a course. I'm saving lives, which I did. I help people by listening because I like people. I said, why can't a reporter come in and see what it is? How could every reporter be a suppressive person? This is insane. And I said, why can't someone go on television? I said, I would go on television. When people are upset about Scientology, I tell them, well, no, that's not what it is. And they say, oh, I didn't even know that. So in Scientology, no one answers questions. If you see an interview, they'll say, well, is this true? And they'll ask you if your mother was a Nazi. You know, they don't answer questions. So there's this secretiveness about the press.
Were you or did you ever promise refunds if you did not achieve or you did not accomplish what was promised?
Was I personally promised? Or it's standard policy that anyone who is not satisfied with a service in Scientology, their money is promptly refunded. It's part of the Auditor's Code, which says I promise to refund any money.
Do you know of anyone that did receive any refunds?
Very few people. I don't even know if I know anyone personally. I know people who have attempted to get refunds. You have a kind of a complicated routing form, and you have to see a lot of people, and it takes a very long time. I think some people got their money back because people have been referred to as a refund case. In those cases, it was where the person was attempting to cause a lot of trouble. In other words, if it was a security risk or the person was connected to someone in the government or the parents were going to take legal action, I understand that, I don't know the facts, but I understand the money was given back very promptly. But if you were just an average person who came in, they'll say, well, you know, write up your overts and we'll go to cramming and go to review, let's handle your case. And a lot of people who wanted a refund, by the time you get out of that routing form, you changed your mind because they found your reason and they promised you a new process. You say, well, I think I'll hang around a little more. So I don't know of anyone, no one I know ever got their money back.
Did you ever have to sign a legal waiver, promising that you'd never sue? Or do you know of anyone who has? Is that standard policy?
I signed a lot of waivers, and I don't even know what they were. I signed bonds for $50,000, $100,000, talk about certain things ever, that I wouldn't sue. I think my sister did, but when she threatened to call the Board of Health, they made her sign something after that she would never sue, I think. But I had to sign a lot of things. There was one that I don't know if I want to tell about that. I could.
Go ahead if you want to tell about it.
Well, this has to do with Clearwater. When I first joined the Sea Organization, I went to Los Angeles, and I was filling out my life history, you know, my background and when I was on staff, and what organization, how long I stayed there. And I happened to put something that I left the New York organization. I was there for 3 years as a supervisor. I left in 1975. I finished my contract, which was 2.5 years. I stayed an extra 6 months. And then my boyfriend at the time, who I was going with developed cancer. And I became very upset about this, and I didn't know what to do. I was afraid of the medical profession at the time. We're told that they're suppressives and they want to cut you up and they want to operate and the cancer's going to spread. I was frantic. I didn't know what to do. A friend of mine who happened to be a Scientologist and a very, very close friend recommended a psychic healer in Mexico. I never heard of a psychic healer. You know, I haven't been in any healing practices, but I was so desperate and so in such terror that he told me that he has a blind son, and he told me that the doctor had taken a tumor out from the back of his son's eye with his hands, with no things. And him telling me that as a Class 8 and such a good friend of mine, you know, sane type person, stable, he wasn't one of the flaky ones who are flying in space. I wishful thinking, I said, maybe this is true. And I went to Mexico, and my boyfriend didn't go he went to the doctor, and the doctor wanted to do a biopsy, and we said, no, we went to Mexico. When I went there, I walked into the office, and I was shocked. I felt that I was at the Scientology Advanced Organization. Every person in the waiting room was a Scientologist, and some of them were my good friends that I had done courses with in 1968. They were Class 8s, they were OT 6s, and a high level of training and processing, and they all had cancer. And I was shocked. I said, what are they doing here? You know, how could this be? I was very optimistic then about the healer, and then I went into, I guess, hallucinating at the time. I just had blind faith that this was going to save his life. And then a friend of mine was there, and she said that she wrote a letter to Ron Hubbard asking him what he felt about this fella. His name was Feliciano. What did he think about psychic healing? She showed me the telex from Ron Hubbard, and what it said was that I believe this is valid therapy. He said, I am not recommending it, but I believe it is the only valid therapy on the planet. I feel it is the truest form of surgery on the planet, but I'm not recommending it. So I felt relieved that even Ron Hubbard said that this might work. Not that I came here because of Ron Hubbard, but it was gave me a little bit more confidence. I stayed there for 2 or 3 months, and things got worse, and I had to bring my boyfriend back to New York, and he died in Sloan Kettering about 3 months after he first got it. It was very quick. Now, when I arrived at L.A. to join the Sea Organization, I happened to mention, I don't know why, that I left staff. I was like filling in my life. I went to Mexico with my boyfriend, and so I was explaining that I wasn't on staff during that period. I was waiting to leave for Clearwater, and someone came down to see me, and they said, the GO wants to talk to you about something. They said they want a full report on this psychic healer. We want to know what happened, who was there, what happened in Mexico. I wrote a detailed report about every person who was there, what happened. I happened to include the telex. Someone came down and told me that I had to sign a waiver. I think it was for $50,000, that I would never discuss this with anyone. And they said that I didn't see a telex from Ron Hubbard.
You did not?
I didn't see it, and I signed a waiver that I didn't see a telex from Ron Hubbard. And I looked at it and I said, well, it's probably for PR reasons that they don't want it out, that Ron Hubbard associated his name with a psychic healer, that people did die. And I have never in Scientology compromised my reality. I never went along with something that I didn't think was totally, totally ethical. But this time I did. I said, it's not that important. I don't care about the healer anymore, and there's no one I want to tell about it. So I signed the paper thinking, well, they're looking to protect Ron's name, so I'm not going to talk about it. But when I got to Clearwater, this Kip Hansen brought it out, and he humiliated me, and I was still very sensitive about the subject, and
well, that's fine there. Mrs.
I just wanted to say one thing that he said to me. He started screaming at me when he saw it in the report, and he said, do you know that that's squirrel? Squirrel in Scientology is someone who doesn't apply Scientology standardly or goes into another practice. He screamed very loud. He didn't say it to me. He said, "Don't you know that squirrel, squirrel?" He screamed it at me. How could a Scientologist go to a, don't you ever talk about this, and I was very upset at the time and choked up. He was talking without any knowledge of what I had been through, and also, when he was sick, I tried in desperation. I called every Scientology organization in the world, and I asked for help, and they said, "We can't help you."
Thank you.
Anything else, Mr. Garvey? Mr. Hatchett?
Point of information, Mayor, if I may.
Certainly.
The question of a legal release was brought up by Mrs. Garvey. We will be putting into evidence the standard legal release, which is contained in their standard volume, which I believe the evidence will show most Scientologists sign, but I believe the evidence will show that most Scientologists are not aware of what they're signing. But we will be putting that into evidence together with actual the form, together with actual forms that have been signed by former Scientologists, together with promissory notes, waivers, and affidavits of the type that the witnesses.
Will you be doing that after this witness's testimony, in other words, today?
I'm not sure it'll be today in terms of the point of order of our witnesses and our evidence, but it'll be in before tomorrow afternoon. Right. And there's substantial and a great deal of evidence pertaining to this stuff.
Mr. Hatchett.
Fine, thank you, Laurie. I'd like to just ask you maybe 3 questions, please. When you came to Clearwater in 1979, and you found things in disarray, why did you do not turn around and go back? You couldn't?
Well, I felt I came here to do this course, and it was going to be the greatest thing that ever happened. And I was used to, after 15 years of overcoming the obstacles of the insane people, I said, well, I know a lot of staff members are just crazy and they don't understand the real technology. So I wasn't shocked. I just thought that it wouldn't be at FLAG. I've seen it in every organization, but FLAG is the ultimate. It is the highest. When you're going to FLAG, it's the biggest honor in the world. So I didn't expect to see it here, but I wasn't shocked.
All right. You said when you left Clearwater, trying to escape, before that you felt like a prisoner.
Yes.
You were going insane, and you feared for your life. Is that a form of kidnapping?
Well, I wasn't.
You against your will. You wanted to go.
Yeah, I wasn't kidnapped, and a lot of it is a mental.
Mental kidnapping.
Yeah, it's you can't leave. Plus, I heard stories of physical abuse and locking up, and I know people who were in chain lockers who were chained up. I spoke with them. Not at Clearwater. I don't know if it was probably in Los Angeles or on the ship, but I knew there were these forms of punishment. And there's also an obligation not to leave, even if you wanted to. When you're a Scientologist, you are mentally hooked. After Clearwater, I was out, but I wasn't out. My mind, I was still a Scientologist up until 2 months ago. And I thought I was out. And even after I thought I was out again, it didn't happen actually until a few weeks ago, where I now feel that I'm back to a free-thinking individual. I also feel that I'm now part of the human race again, and I've been very happy for the last 2 weeks. I feel like I have a new life now.
Thank you. Before coming to Clearwater, you were instructed not to talk to Clearwater residents, not only Clearwater officials.
This is after I arrived. I was told that.
Why did they tell you Clearwater residents? I may understand why not Clearwater officials.
Anyone in Clearwater, not a Scientologist.
No one.
They didn't say residents, or they didn't say don't talk to them. I mean, they said be polite. You can say hello, but don't discuss anything of your business here or why you were here. Give the pat answer, which was I'm here for religious counseling or something like that.
Do you feel you lost your business as a result of Scientology, your business in New York?
Well, it was directly related. I kind of, through Scientology, I tend to take a lot of responsibility for my decisions. I don't like to blame people.
What was your business in New York?
I had a store one time, a souvenir store in Times Square in Manhattan. I have computer pictures that go on the T-shirt. I did promotional work for radio stations, and I've had about every time I came out, I started a new business. The computer machine I still have. I still get jobs. I do parties and promotional work.
Okay. I will stop at this moment.
Do you have any
Okay.
questions, Mr. Shoemaker?
Yes, Mayor, if I might. Ms. Taverna, Relating to the education of the children,
Mm-hmm.
do you know, are there any specific types of qualifications that the teachers are to have
No.
for these courses?
The people who teach the children are not teachers. They're staff members. They don't have any teaching degree.
They do not have a teaching
No.
degree.
I don't know any. I think there might have been one. I think there was one in the ability school where my daughter went in New York. But I know for a fact that the teachers in Los Angeles were not teachers when my daughter was there.
Is that considered to be in Scientology a good job or a bad job, or?
To be a teacher?
Yes.
I really don't know. I do know from other staff members that to be a nanny, which is the person who takes care of the children, I've heard this from other staff members who have to do with personnel, that very often when they have a person who they consider slightly degraded or who can't handle a post, they put them on nanny. I got this from my sister-in-law, who was the nanny for many years in the Sea Organization. She blew a few times and came back because she wants to help children. She was confronted with a situation where she had to watch 30 and 40 infants at a time, and the Board of Health would be coming in for inspections. She had to hide 10 and 20 children in a closet. She told me they had things called quiet drills regularly. The children were trained at certain periods of time. They must be quiet. They didn't know why. They were put in a room, the door was locked, and until the officials left, they couldn't make any sounds. I justified this as we're doing the best we can. If we don't have room for the children, we can't close Scientology. All this has been justified. Like I will never justify another thing again.
When you initially arrived at the Fort Harrison, or during your...
I'm sorry, I missed...
Sure. At the time you were, during your time you were a Scientologist, did you ever go through a security check or
Yes. I've had a security check many times. When you arrive somewhere, I was on the one of Ron Hubbard's ships in 1968, which was the Royal Scotsman. I was there when he was on the ship. I met him. And before you enter any place where Ron Hubbard is, you must be security checked. If you are going to get a leave of absence or leave the premises at any time, you have to get a security check. At Clearwater, as an auditor, I was called to do many security checks on people if they were taking a leave or a vacation for a week.
During the time you were auditing, and in my understanding of the auditing process, you're actually auditing as to whether the beliefs are being accepted or not of the person that you're auditing, for the course that they're in at that time. Would that be correct?
I'm sorry, I didn't understand the question.
If you were, your audit specifically relates directly to how well the person is doing in the given course that they might be in at a particular time, such as with this NEPOT auditing that you were doing to the people that were actually doing the course. And you have indicated that you had some concerns about what you were learning in that course. Did that ever bother you at the time you were doing the auditing to try to determine what the other person...
That I was auditing the other people, was I concerned?
About what they were saying?
I became very concerned with the people that I was auditing because I saw very strange things from the people that I was auditing, specifically one person who I went to the director of processing and I said, I refuse to audit this person. He had a strange glare in his eyes. He was running this NOTS process, and I won't go into the technical things of the e-meter, but the e-meter is supposed to register a certain way when you feel better. The needle will go down. This fellow was realizing things, and the needle was going up. He was, I can see by his face that he was not there. He was in a daze, and he was like, sort of like had an insane look, and he was saying how wonderfully, talking slowly. Nothing was happening on the e-meter, and I said, there's something wrong with this person. And I said, I'm not auditing them, so they took me off the case, and I understand he was really winning with other auditors. But and specifically another person, I felt like I was betraying the people that I was audited, and I didn't want to do it anymore.
With I noticed, or at least through observation, that at least the people that come here to Clearwater, many of them are young or younger. You don't see a great number of elderly people. Would that be a fair surmise, or do you have any reason as to why that is the case?
I think it's always been that way from even when I came in. I think young people are very susceptible to this because it sounds like such a beautiful purpose. Most young people have ideals and they want to change the world. And when you come into Scientology, I've seen people who walk in the door and they are just like flying for weeks and weeks. They feel they've found something, and young people recognize the outnesses in this world, and they don't know how to change them. And you walk in the door, and you find a group of people who have a good purpose and want to change the world. I think they're much more susceptible, and they don't have that much experience in life to know exactly what they're getting into.
Yes. Since you've left Scientology, first of all, do they know, I'm sure they do now, but did they know before now?
I would say that most of the Scientologists in the world have no idea that I left. Up until now, they will know. But when I finally called Brown McKee and started getting answers, I realized that I didn't have to see any documents. I don't care about Ron Hubbard's past. I realize that I have been absolutely miserable for the past 10 years. I've hated it. I've fought all the staff members. I don't care if it's true or it's not true. I don't want to be part of it. So I actually forgot the question, but I wanted to say something about it.
You answered it very well. My other part of it is just basically, have you had any kind of, anyone try to put any pressure on you or anything such as that?
Yes, I remember. So what I did was basically, my sister will tell her story, but she was married to someone in the Sea Org at the time, and he was living with us at my sister's house. So here I was, talking to suppressors, and this fellow's going to get killed. He's going to go on the RPF. We're talking to lawyers. We're talking to the biggest SPs in the world, and I don't think any of you really understand how traumatic it's unthinkable. So we were shaking. I was in such fear I couldn't sleep for days. So we told my sister's husband, because we knew that we were going to be out now. So he went back and he told them, and we since called them and said that we are no longer, I didn't want my name to be associated with it. We had no harassment at all. I was very surprised. I did get phone calls from old friends from 66, students who I hadn't heard from since 1965, called me up. Do you remember me? I want to tell you how you changed my life, and I love you. And it was sincere because I did. And he said, please, if I can help you, I'm here. And I said, I want you to know that I'm in fine shape, and there's nothing wrong, and there's nothing to handle. But they attempted to have old friends call me up to get to me because they knew my button, which is something that you react to, is help. And if I know I can help someone, I'll kind of go back, but I was already over and nothing could change me. But no, I was in terrible fear, but I have had no harassment.
During the process that you were in, or while you were in Scientology, did anyone attempt to use the information you provided through the auditing process where you were audited against you?
No.
Is that Mr. Julian?
Barrett, let me just check one real quick. Were you aware of what's been referred to as a fair game policy?
Oh, yes. That was in effect when I was on staff.
And that was up until, you said you just left, when did you leave Clearwater?
Well, I left Clearwater in December of 1979, and I officially left mentally Scientology, a few weeks ago, or 2 months. I'm not in the organization.
So up until 2 months ago, you were still an active Scientologist, and as far as you know, the fair game policy was still in effect.
Oh, I don't know. I don't know who was in effect as of 2 months ago. I really don't know. I meant I have seen it in effect. I don't know currently if it is. I assume it is. It's in effect through actions, because I know things are done to people, and I know a Scientologist will do anything they have to protect Scientology, and I remember feeling that way, and I have compassion for them, because I was so misled that I felt it was justifiable. It was justified to stop a suppressive person who wants to harm good people, and I believe it would always be in effect. That policy will never be out of effect in actions. It was probably canceled officially.
One other question, and I'll stop. I just,
okay.
And really, I really appreciate listening to you. I think it's really been an educational process, I'd say, for all of us. In the auditing process, is there, and this kind of relates, maybe let me ask two questions. Was there any types of clinics provided for people that were ill or had cuts or scratches or headaches or anything like that, or anyone who had a toothache or a tooth problem or something like that at any of the main organizations where that you came and stayed for the counseling and so forth?
No. There was a medical officer. He had a first aid kit. And if you needed a dentist, you can go to a dentist.
Would he prescribe drugs?
I don't know. He never did with me. He prescribed, I saw him prescribe vitamins He prescribed vitamins for me when I was sick. I don't remember what they were. He told me to take this and that. And basically nutritional things and what to eat. Take the CalMag every day for your nerves.
Yeah. I understand that in the auditing process that there was a procedure or that it was a policy not to provide auditing for somebody that had been diagnosed as terminally ill.
Yes.
Did they ever explain the reason or why that policy was?
In the early days when I was in Scientology, I just assumed that Dianetics would handle anything. I figured, well, if someone got cancer, they would. But then I saw so many of my friends die of cancer who had the highest level of auditing. And, well, my boyfriend died, and he couldn't get any auditing, so I know it's not allowed.
Yeah.
I assumed that it was because the person was dying, and if you audited them, Scientology could be connected to the failure, and the person dying, it would be a bad promotional activity to audit someone who's already dying, because I don't think they had any chance of saving them.
As the mayor of the city, I like to think about the image that we have of the city, and when we mention Rome, you get a certain mental image, and you mentioned Salt Lake City, you get another image, and I guess you get it totally different when you mention Dachau. What do you think of when you were going to come to Clearwater when you first arrived, and what did you think of Clearwater after you escaped? You mentioned the word hell before. Did that have any connotation with our city?
What I thought of Clearwater was just so horrible. I couldn't believe that anyone lived here. I hated everything about the city. I heard the name, and the association was with misery and pain, and I said it was ugly and horrible, and it just meant pain and misery to me. I said I would never come back here for the rest of my life or look at it. I got almost physically ill when I looked at mail and pictures of it. I would get tremors for about a month after if I got a brochure and looked at the Fort Harrison. And I noticed something interesting. Last night I was on the balcony where I'm staying, and I looked at the beach, and I said it's one of the most beautiful cities I've been in, and I'm looking through new eyes. And I said, what did I think was so horrible? It was being in an atmosphere that was so ugly and so suppressive. I don't think of it, I mean, I might still have a little bit if I hear Clearwater, but I know it's not that way now.
Thank you. You just need a couple of more days here, and you'll love it, too.
Okay.
Thank you very much. We'd
You're
like
welcome.
to, you've been very good, very cooperative, and very brave lady for being here.
Thank you.
Mayor, can we take a 10-minute recess?
Yes, we can. Back in 10 minutes, ladies and gentlemen.